Hello stream. Good afternoon and welcome to the live stream where we watch NASA stuff land on Mars, and in particular we're watching the InSight lander. Now the InSight lander has been traveling for quite a bit. Hello everybody, and it's so exciting. They've been traveling quite a bit. They're going to land on Mars today. If you guys don't know about this lander, it's been sent to Mars, and it's not just going to land on the planet and move around like the other little rovers. It's just going to land and stay in one spot, and it's going to send a little drill about 5 meters down into the planet, and it's going to learn a lot more about the planet than we've ever known, before. Now, we as in NASA sent a lander to Mars, obviously before, the Viking, the very first lander, and it did have seismometers on it. But the problem with those seismometers were they were on top of the spacecraft, so there's a lot of noise and a lot of not so strong signals to see what was going on in Mars's subsurface. I'm seeing everybody in the chat. I'm so excited to see everyone. Will it land on my head? I don't think so. So Mars, how does it feel now to have something land on you? Well, it's not me, myself. I am Mars Yurip. That's my name. I'm also a solar ambassador. It's a program, a volunteer program run through the Jet Propulsions Lab in Pasadena, Altadena, and I'm here to share with you guys specifically, this this really funny event where at around the end of the hour, we'll see Mars, the InSight land on Mars. I'm sorry, I'm super nervous because I'm super excited, and hold on. To calm my nerves and to get you guys into what is about to go down, let me play for you a special something. Now this is very, very dramatic, okay? But it encapsulates what is going on today and also just what is at stake, because so much is going on at the same time that if anything fails, we're done. That's it. End of stream. But of course, there is a 7-minute delay from Mars to Earth, and we won't know until it's already happened. But to go into more detail about what's going to happen, how about guys, let's watch this.
Although we've done it before, landing on Mars is hard, and this mission is no different. The process to get from the top of the atmosphere of Mars to the surface, we call entry, descent, and landing, or EDL. It takes thousands of steps to go from the top of the atmosphere to the surface, and each one of them has to work perfectly to be a successful mission. The process starts well above the top of the atmosphere of Mars. The cruise stage faces the sun. It also has its radio antenna, which faces Earth. But now we don't need the cruise stage. Its job is done. The next step, just 7 minutes before arriving to the top of the Mars atmosphere, is to separate the cruise stage. Before you hit the top of the atmosphere, though, the space capsule has to orient itself so that the heat shield is precisely facing the atmosphere. Now the fun begins. The vehicle is moving at nearly 13,000 miles an hour, but it's hitting the top of the atmosphere at a very shallow angle, 12 degrees. Any steeper, the vehicle will hit the thicker part of the atmosphere and will melt and burn up. Any shallower, the vehicle will bounce off the atmosphere of Mars. At the very top of the atmosphere, it's about 70 miles above the surface of Mars, and the air is starting to get thicker and thicker and thicker. As it does that, the temperature on that heat shield gets well over 1,000 degrees centigrade, enough to melt steel. Over the next 2 minutes, the vehicle decelerates at a backbreaking 12 Earth Gs, from 13,000 miles an hour to about 1,000 miles an hour. At about 10 miles above the surface of Mars, a supersonic parachute is launched out of the back of the vehicle. 15 seconds after the parachute inflates, it's time to get rid of the heat shield. 6 pyrotechnic devices fire simultaneously, allowing the heat shield to fall and tumble away from the vehicle, exposing the lander to the surface of Mars. 10 seconds after the heat shield is dropped, 3 pyrotechnically deployed legs are released and locked for landing. About a minute later, the landing radar is turned on, sending pulses toward the surface of Mars as the vehicle starts to try to measure how high it is above the surface and how fast it's going. At about a mile above the surface of Mars, the lander falls away from the back shell and lights its engines. And very quickly, the vehicle must rotate out of the way so that the parachute and the back shell doesn't come down to hit it. The last thing that has to happen is that on the moment of contact, the engines have to shut down immediately. If they don't, the vehicle will tip over. So if all of the steps of entry, descent, and landing happen perfectly and we are safely on the surface of Mars, we'll be ready to do some exciting new science.
And that's today. All right, pals. Now, landing on Mars, as you can see, is no small task. The whole planning of how we even got here is crazy. I've got some slides for you from the planning stage of landing on Mars with the InSight mission. So it's, we play a lot of video games, right? And we normally just get our spaceship and we point at a planet and we say, okay, we want to land here. And we, of course, have, depending on what kind of game we're playing, let's say we're playing like Kerbal Space Program or another sort of like Mars survival thing where we land on a planet, we open up our solar arrays, and we're ready to go. Well, it turns out it's obviously not that easy. There's only certain places, especially with our current solar arrays, where we can land. And so on Mars in particular, the best places to land for the best sort of, solar efficiency is towards around the equator. So as we see here were the landing constraints for this mission. Landing latitude from 15 degrees to 15 degrees south to 5 degrees north. Elevation, now it couldn't be too high. Now, because Mars's atmosphere is only 1% that of Earth's. So the amount of friction that we have is very, very small. I mean, we've all seen like lots of videos from the previous Mars rover going through the atmosphere. It's hitting it really hard, and obviously from this video we see the dangers of of going in it too steep or too shallow. But with all that said, it's only 1%. So you need a lot of atmosphere above you before you can safely deploy that parachute. Let's see, ellipse size. There's some other things here. Now, one of the things that I didn't understand until just recently, what the heck thermal inertia meant. Basically, it meant when we land this spacecraft onto Mars, we're going to drill a hole about 5 meters deep. The problem is if we run into rocks, that's it. It's not designed to go through rocks. It's designed to go through soil. So how are they going to figure out what's underneath the surface of the planet before we even land? For that, there's a satellite going around Mars called Odyssey and has an instrument on there called the thermos. And what it does is it measures a certain spot on Mars's surface, and it sees how it cools off, how fast or slow it cools off at nighttime. And it determines what the subsurface composition is. So the thermal inertia basically means how, kind of like with speed inertia or mass inertia, it's slower to takes more energy to start something, and then also, takes a lot of energy to slow down. Same thing with heat. If there's big rocks and stuff, those things are going to heat up. And they take a long time to heat up, but they also take a long time to cool down. Things with like sand or rocks, those things are a little bit faster in that regard. So you don't want rocks, because if you land this lander on some rocks, it's going to tip over. You land on sand, one of the legs is going to sink. So you want to make sure you land on something that's very smooth, very flat also. where it's landing is called the parking lot of Mars, because it's so flat and so empty. And then it's going to be able to dig in the soil and not with what's it called, the rocks. Okay, over here. So this is a sort of a really poor map. What's it called? Map of Mars here. Let me just downsize this a bit. Oops, did the wrong thing. Doesn't matter. Okay, so again, the global latitude. This is the window where we're able to land. See that blue line there? That's the latitude just above 1 degree north, where it's landing, and it's a very small window. And again, you need to be at the equator so that we can maximize the amount of solar energy you're gathering up with your solar rays. Okay, and then over here, thermal inertia. See these those white stuff and the gray stuff? It's too dusty. You can't land in those spots. The red spots, that's the areas that's too high to land, and the green areas, that's so it's okay. But the problem is, if you go into the green areas, you go a little bit too far away from the 5 degrees north and 15 degrees south operating zone. So even here, you can see that it's the window of that they're looking for is very, very small for this mission to go off. And then let's go next slide. And here, this is a bunch of color. Who the heck knows what this means, other than that there's a key down here. Again, the thermal inertia. This is measuring what it's like underneath the surface of the proposed landing sites. Again, if it's too rocky, the drill's not going to make about the 5 meters it needs to make to do its measurements. And if it's too sandy, or if it's too dusty, the legs of the spacecraft are just going to sink, or it's going to make it go in at an angle, make the drill bit go in at an angle. And then they did a bunch of tests where these little ellipses, these are the proposed landing sites, and they map each ellipse with different spacecraft that they have going over Mars. And they look at each one, trying to figure out which one has the best candidate for landing spot. And here, this is a high-res image, and you can see they can even find just one rock in this whole area. So this is the Mars's parking lot, where it's a lot of craters, but only one rock. That right there in the red. Let's see over here. And then here's a down selection. Again, they're going in depth into each one of these ellipses and studying it as if it were going to be the actual landing site. The amount of time that went into finding not just the landing spot for this spacecraft, but also the potential landing spots of the spacecraft is immense. There's just the science behind finding where to put this thing. I feel matches the science that is being put to figure out what the heck is under it once they land. And again, here's more ellipses of possible landing sites, but now this is more narrowed down, and you can see the different types of terrain that's in there that they know of, and we won't know for sure until we land there, and that's a big thing. Like after all this, making it through the atmosphere and landing successfully, we won't know for sure if the mission even is going to be a success after deployment until we start digging. And then finally, the last little parking lot area, and they try to find Medusa. Yeah, no, it hasn't landed yet, Tobias. Soon, towards the end of the hour, I'm going to bring up a schedule, and then we're going to go live towards the NASA's live stream. And I'll try not to talk too much over it, but when it's boring, I'll give you some info on what's going on. But anyways, as you can see, there's a lot of freaking stuff going on just to get it there. All this science done just to figure out which place they might put it. And let's hope it goes there. All right, here we go. Here's the schedule. If you guys just tune in, here we are. Now, this is all in see, this is PST, obviously for Pacific Standard Time in America. And over here we have Eastern Standard Time. So at 2:40, separation from cruise stage that carried the mission to Mars. And then the rest of it is down from here. So the descent is going to start at 2:40, and hopefully we'll be seeing some landing right around down here. Expected touchdown at 2:54. So about, what was that, 14 minutes? Jesus Christ. I mean, Jesus crazy. All right. I see a lot of stuff in the comments. I'm sorry I'm not reading everything. I know. Look, Mom, I'm streaming. Look, Mom, get the camera. I'm doing it. I'm trying my best, guys. I'm so nervous for this. It's not like a regular stream where we play games. This is something that, you know, if anything messes up, that's it. It's kind of a sad deal, right? But okay, let's just go into it. Let's see. Maybe refresh this over here. I forgot I'm not on a Mac. I need to push that. And let's go see what's going on over here.
So just to run it through it once again, what's going to happen with EDL? We have the video, the show. How exactly is this all going to play out in 6.5 minutes? And we can roll the video.
Okay. Yeah, so you can see here we're attached to the cruise stage. We drop that off, say thank you for the ride to Mars. It burns up in the atmosphere. You can see it gets very hot on our heat shield. We're getting up in some places maybe 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit as we go through this. We're on the heat shield for about 4 minutes. That dissipates about 90% of the energy that we need to dissipate before we get to the surface. Then we pop our parachute. We're going about 850 miles an hour when we pop the parachute. We're on that for about 2 minutes. Then we'll drop off the heat shield. We'll start acquiring the ground with our radar, very much like an F-16 fighter jet radar. The legs will pop out. We'll start descending. We drop for just a second, which is very terrifying for me. Our descent thrusters, we have 12 of them. They're 68-pound thrusters. Start thrusting and dropping us to the ground. And slowly, we drop down, going only 5 miles an hour. So in that 6.5 minutes of terror, which is a little less than the 7 minutes, so that's great for me, we go from 12,300 miles an hour at 75 miles above the surface of Mars. We get to the surface, we're at 5.5 miles an hour.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Well, before you go, Tom, there was a couple of pictures we wanted to show you. We have watch parties taking place all over the country, and let's see if we can put one of these watch parties up for you to see. This is from Ohio. This is a person who has a watch party. It looks like
no, Jim, Mars is not
so
flat.
awesome.
Isn't that great that folks are watching with us?
Yeah, I know people all across the globe are watching this, and we really want to put on a good show for them today.
All right. Well, I'll let you back in the
all right,
room.
I got to get back in there.
I know you're excited. All right. Take care. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's them right there. So they just gave us a little bit of a tidbit of what's going to happen. Is Mars an instrument? Is it an instrument? Let's take a look at the InSight lander here. So here it is on the planet. Not yet, but when it's there, this is what it's going to look like. Now, excuse me, because there's going to be a lot of lag here. So when it does land, it's going to deploy these solar arrays, and they fold out like this. They have to be really, really small and compact to fit in the spacecraft, and they come out radially like that. And again, the lander has landed around near the equator, so it gets a lot of top down. Obviously, sunlight from the sun. I'm sorry. I'm new to this. Okay. So yeah, those things are done. And hold on, let me tell these guys to be quiet a little bit. And after that, in about a week or so, now once it's all said and done on the surface, it's going to take about a week or so to make sure all the instruments are fine. Everything's running perfectly. The little cameras inside of it are taking pictures of itself and of the ground around it, do some surveys, and then science teams here on Earth are going to analyze all those photos and make sure all the systems are working just fine, and then it's going to start deploying. All right, let's see. Let's deploy this thing. What's next? Okay, yeah, here we go. Instrument context camera, as you can see, it's taking pictures of the stuff around it, and then the arm comes out. Now this little arm here is going to do all the heavy lifting for this mission. It's a very modular spacecraft, And so it needs a little crane to lift things off the top of it. You see that golden thing here and that dome there and this black thing over there? This little thing's going to lift and place very carefully onto the ground all these different instruments. And the science teams are going to make sure that the crane's working, everything's all nice and tidy. It's going to pick up the seismometer, which is this thing here. It's in this vacuum little thing. And it's going to place that right on the ground. And it's got here for the power and also for signals. And then after that, they need to make sure that this, unlike in the Viking mission, where the seismometer was on top of the spacecraft, they're putting it directly to the ground, and it will only read once it's on the ground. And to protect it from winds and dust and anything else, it's going to put this little shield on top of it. So now the crane's getting the shield, and it's going to put it right on top. It's kind of like when you get like a fancy meal at a restaurant or at a hotel. It's going to bring, the waiter puts a thing on top of thing, which honestly I've never seen done. I've never seen any food given to me with a big old, food cover. And there you go. And it puts that thing down there. And then the whole drill thing's going to happen. Then it picks up, let's see here, the big drill bit. And it's going to put that to the ground. And all these movements are pre-programmed. So there's no operator operating this arm. It's all stuff that's been programmed into it. But they got to make sure everything's, when it does place it onto the ground, they don't place it onto like a pebble that's going to make it slide to the left, or on a rock that's going to make it tip over. And also they make sure where the head comes out into the ground, that it's not hitting like directly a rock. Like again, it's designed to go through the soil, not through solid rock. And there it goes. It's a self-drilling, self-hammering hole thing. To be honest, I'm not sure how this works, where it hammers itself in there. But once it goes down, obviously this isn't the scale, but once it goes down, it'll go down about 5 meters. And from there, it'll be able to detect earthquakes, crater impacts, anything that makes a sort of signal that tells us more about the Mars's interior. And close this. And this website here, it's nice. It's called the Experience Insight. I will have to say it's a bit laggy. I don't know why. But you can go around and touch all the different instruments and do like the little play-by-play stuff. And let's go back to NASA and see what they're yapping about.
Investigator of Mars Insight. Insight is a mission to Mars. But
you expected better grammar? I'm
again
sorry.
It's more than a mission to Mars.
That's right, Gay. I mean, we're going to Mars, obviously, to study the Martian interior and to map out the divisions inside Mars, but we want to use that information to understand more about the solar system as a whole and how rocky planets form.
And rocky planets, we have an image to show folks. So we're talking about Earth, the Moon, Mars.
Mercury, Venus, yes, the planets of the inner solar system that are made mostly of rocks. And they all share the same basic structure with a dense iron core, a rocky mantle, and then a crust of lighter silicate rocks. But the very details of the thicknesses of those layers, the sizes, and the compositions give us a lot of clues as to how those planets form and why they went down very different paths into the different planets we see today.
So explain to me, we are going to have a lander. You're going to be on the surface.
Okay, they're talking about run-of-the-mill stuff. Let's talk about that too. Let's see, you guys, if any questions you have in the chat, I'll go ahead and read those right now.
Same way you might use a flash bulb to take pictures of something. We're using Mars quakes, which send out vibrational waves through the planet. And as they go through the planet, they reflect off boundaries. They get bent. They change their velocity, and it changes the wiggles that you see on a seismogram. When we go through the planet, you can see that here it hits the various boundaries and those waves are reflected. Sometimes they're bent. It becomes a pretty complicated pattern, but scientifically we've learned over the last 100 years how to interpret the code of the signal as it comes back up to the surface, and the seismometers pick up that signal and then turn it into data that we can use on Earth to understand, what the 3D structure is of the planet.
So normally you use 3 seismometers. In this case, you're bringing SEIS, that's 1. How are you going to be able to get that information using 1?
Well, we had to get kind of clever because on the Earth, usually you have plenty of seismometers. You can use multiple seismometers to triangulate in on where the earthquake is. On Mars, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to use not only the P and the S waves that you may have heard
You
about,
see the
but
signal,
we're using the surface waves. And here you can see
receive and
the surface waves
stuff
kind
in
of
the background.
moving out from Marsquake, and as it passes over the InSight lander, you can see the seismogram up there in the upper left-hand corner where you have the wiggles. Now, those waves keep on going around the planet, and because Mars is not so large, they still have a fair amount of amplitude. They haven't gotten completely damped out by the time it's gone all the way around the planet, passes over the spacecraft again, and finally, even the wave that went the other way around the planet comes across and hits us yet a third time. And so we have extra information over just the P and the S wave. We have these surface wave arrivals that we can use to pinpoint the distance from the Marsquake to our lander. And then we use something called polarization analysis to figure out which direction the waves are coming from. And by doing that, we can do the same thing that we can do with 3 stations on the Earth, just using the P and the S waves.
And very quickly, there is still another instrument built by DLR that's also being carried up by InSight. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's our heat flow probe. And it's a pretty cool instrument that uses a mechanical mole, we call it, to burrow its way down into the surface. It has a motor with that winds up a hammer, and it knocks itself down just a few millimeters at a time. But we do that 20 or 30,000 hammer strokes, and it gets us down. We hope to get down to be about 16 feet below the surface. And once we get down there, we're actually measuring the heat coming out of the planet by measuring the temperature along the cable as it comes up to the surface, and looking at how that temperature increases as we go down, and extrapolate that deep into the planet to understand how much energy there is inside the planet to drive the geology and to drive volcanism, Marsquakes, all kinds of activity.
It's amazing how much you'll be able to learn from the surface about the interior.
That's right. I think it is amazing, and it's been something that I've been working on for my whole professional career, and it's just I find it fascinating. But
all right, we'll talk about that. Thanks,
Okay.
Bruce. Bruce first thought of a mission like this, as he mentions, 40 years ago when he was a graduate student. The rest of the team hasn't waited quite that long, but this is a big moment for them too. Recently, we sat down with a few of the members and asked them what is it going to be like as we get close to landing.
It's a very difficult thing to do, and everything has to go perfectly. As humans, we've sent 17 different missions to the surface of Mars, and 10 of them have crashed. Before we can land on Mars, we have to get to Mars. How do we get to Mars?
The main responsibility of the navigation team is to ensure that the spacecraft is delivered to the right point at the top of the Martian atmosphere. The target location is about 12 kilometers in size. Our accuracy is comparable to shooting a basketball from Staples Center in downtown LA and hitting nothing but net in a basketball hoop in New York City that is moving at a speed of about 2 feet per second and is spinning about its axis.
The landing site, we have an ellipse that's pretty big. It's about 60 miles long. We could land anywhere in that ellipse. There's a chance that we could land right on a rock, and we don't really have any control over that, so that's what makes me nervous.
We've tested the radar by flying it on a helicopter. We've tested pieces of the heat shield by putting them in an arc jet facility. We've tested the parachute by testing it in a wind tunnel. And putting all that together in a very tightly controlled sequence where every single thing has to go right, we've never tested that. And the first time it's going to happen is once you deliver us to Mars.
It is about 11:29 a.m. Pacific, and you're watching live coverage of the InSight landing from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. We are about a half hour away from landing, and people all over the world are watching. Take a look at a map that we have for you. We can show you right now. This is a watch in person map where people have watch parties all over the world, all over the United States, in Paris, in Berlin, even off the coast of Madagascar.
And in the YouTube here on the internet. Thanks, guys, for joining us. The Mars lander, the InSight lander, will land at around, we'll start separating from the cruise stage at 2:40. And again, it's going to land around 2:54. We'll see. We won't know for sure. Now, this is all Earth time. This is when we'll get the information of when this happens. It'll have happened already. But just to keep things less confusing, because if there is a 7-minute delay from what happens on Mars is received here on Earth, they just keep it in Earth time. So that way everybody watching this doesn't get mixed up on what happened when. Also, along with this mission are a couple of other side missions. They're the first time we've ever sent CubeSats to Mars. We got Mars Cube 1, A and B, and they are there's the 2 CubeSats, and it's the first interplanetary CubeSat mission. And what they're going to do, their main purpose is to just prove the fact that we can send CubeSats to another planet. And they have their main goal is to be able to send information to Earth and receive information from Earth. And that's basically it. Their mission with InSight is independent. There's nothing that it needs to do with InSight other than if they happen to be working at the time that InSight lands, we'll get some images in about 20 minutes after landing of InSight having landed. We'll have higher res images of InSight having landed probably tomorrow. I think, let's see, what time tomorrow? One of the satellites over Mars isn't going to pass over that location till much later, and then we'll definitely have a higher res image of it parked on Mars. Although it'll be a dot, but let alone it's going to be there. Another instrument that I wanted to talk about. Now, of course, we have the seismometer in here, and we have the little drill over here. That's cool. But over here, these two guys. Let me see if I can bring it up on this. Will it bring it up? The RISE antenna. These things are neat. Now, what they do, let's see. They work like a mirror and studies Mars's reflexes. Its antennas send back signals sent from Earth to the lander. On Earth, we study the signal that is sent against the one that is received, which helps track the location of the lander to within centimeters. Now, obviously, they know where the lander is, but there's a purpose for this. Okay, they're going on. That's impressive for a lander that is millions of miles away. RISE tracks the lander's location, and hence Mars's location, over the entire mission to detect tiny changes in Mars's wobble as it orbits the Sun. These observations help determine whether the core is liquid and which other elements besides iron may be present. I think that's phenomenal. Like these little doodads here that send signals back and forth between Earth and Mars, and they track, where it is, and basically they can see if Mars is wobbling. Well, they know it's wobbling, but just by how much. And that little a bit of information helps scientists figure out what it's made out of on the inside. This is nuts. I can't believe it. Let's go back to the live stream and see what they're talking about. Nothing. And this is why we're talking about. But maybe they're waiting for somebody to talk. No, they're just working. They got the red shirts on, or burgundy shirts. This guy's got a nice hat. I like his hat. I'm pretty sure none of them are playing Overwatch right now. Yeah, see? You can hear a door creak.
Systems, we can confirm we are entry minus 20 minutes. EDL nav 2 has been initiated. The star tracker has been powered off.
20 minutes, guys. Now, what I like about sharing this stuff with you guys is that when we do the normal streams,
The Nav2 software has been initiated. So when we're in cruise, we use a star tracker in a similar manner to how sailors navigated years ago. We look at the stars and get our relative position from them. We use a star tracker for that. And now that we're close enough to Mars, we don't need that anymore. So we're going to transition to what's called Nav2 software. And that lets us basically just use velocity and acceleration from this point on. So we don't need the star tracker anymore.
Marco, clarify. Slew to inertial or started bent pipe?
Slew to appropriate attitude for bent pipe. Bent pipe mode will be entered shortly.
Okay, thank you very much.
And that was obviously our confirmation of the slew for Marco, so that's great news.
Fantastic.
I'm with you guys. I don't know what that means, but I'm very happy that they're happy.
So I was saying before that the Nav2 software will propagate from here on out, and we'll use velocity and acceleration. So we have powered off our star tracker, and we're on our Nav2 software, and everything's looking great.
Okay. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks.
All right, the cruise stage separation is just about 4 minutes away, and Rob Manning joins us now. Rob is the chief engineer here at JPL and an absolute veteran of Mars landings. We're going to play a little video for you right now. You haven't seen it yet, but we'll roll it. Let's go ahead. This is
Lander is still live. 14 reports carrier lock at
that day, Rob. There you are. You were the phase lead. You were sitting up front.
Yeah. That's what I look like when it's successful.
Yes.
Going through the memories.
I hate to see what it would be like if I wasn't successful.
But talk about that. What is EDL like? Why is it so hard?
Well, it's many years of work by many, many people who struggle to put all the pieces together, and particularly because we can't really test entry, descent, and landing on this planet. It's much more complicated. Mars has a lower atmosphere, thinner atmosphere, less gravity. You just can't put the pieces. So imagine you had a big Broadway production, but you couldn't really do the show until all the audience shows up. So that's what it feels like. So you never really know if you've really done it right.
Well, we've done it 7 times. Can we say that, hey, piece of cake, we know what we're doing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we get better at it, and there's no doubt. We've learned for both the successes and our own failures, including failures of other missions outside of this country. So those pieces come together in our mind's eye. We try to put what we learn together and just do the best we can. And if we don't succeed, we will learn, because we are collecting data on the way down. If something bad happens today, we'll be able to take what we learned, even though we may fall on the ground after getting kicked off the horse. We'll get back up, brush ourselves off, figure out what we did wrong, and get back on the horse.
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty. Just very quickly,
Which is true. I just break in here, guys. There is a couple more missions to Mars, and there's another rover. I think it's called Mars 2020. So what we do learn here, if we do fail, we're definitely going to take into consideration when we bring in a bigger gianter, oh my God, a bigger rover. So he's not wrong there, but I'd like to see more of that happy face.
But we have to, because if we waited any longer, we'd be on the ground. Very complicated radar system. It has to work from outer space all the way to the ground and look for the ground. What if it locked up on the heat shield? Well, we've tried to avoid that problem. We've fixed that problem, we think, to prevent that from happening. But what if we got it wrong? Things like that could happen, and our vehicle could have things bad happen. But we worked hard to prevent them.
So
at this time, we expect
we're getting close. We're going to go to the control room for cruise stage separation, Rob.
Okay.
Thank you, MRO.
All right, this is the part where they're going to separate from the cruise stage and drop down into the atmosphere. we're all being very quiet because we don't know when someone important is about to say anything. It's a good thing I'm not also there, because I can't stop talking. I will stop talking once they start, so don't worry. This animation here is pre-made, so if anything wonky happens, it won't show up.
Go ahead.
Inside cord. At this time, MRO will have loaded their electrosequences. Marco is expecting carrier lock at any time. Marco B is reported there in bent pipe. Still waiting on A.
Copy that. Thank you.
Radio Science report, UHF carrier detected.
EDLCom, Marco Alpha is in bent pipe mode. Marco Bravo has locked on the carrier. Marco Alpha has also locked on carrier.
System based on inside cord. As expected, the DSN has LOS for inside expand.
Copy that. Thank you.
Christian, we're not going to get any real video because any photos are being taken right now. It's going to be like lots of information to send over any high-res photos, so we won't see anything like that for another couple of weeks, because it actually will take that long for us to download images like that from Mars. They might send back some black and whites, some low-res black and whites, but right now they're just going to be doing some animations of...
Station Insight Systems on Insight Core. DSN has lost the X-band signal from Insight, indicated expected cruise stage separation.
So they have some animations
UHF signal acquisition via Marco or Radio Science.
based on what they expect to happen and what's programmed to happen and when it's going to deploy. We will hear from them and see their reactions.
We are about 5 minutes from entry and have confirmation we've lost the X-band signal from Insight. This was expected because we have transitioned from the antenna on the cruise stage to the UHF antenna on board the spacecraft. Ground stations have detected the UHF signal and Marco has locked on the signal. This confirms that Insight is transmitting UHF signals as expected. Insight telemetry through the Marco relay is not expected until about 2 minutes before entry.
The Marco relay refers to the CubeSats that are orbiting Mars that came along with.
Exactly what we were hoping to hear, that the Marcos are
The vehicle has also performed the turn to entry maneuver. The vehicle is turning away from a sun-pointing attitude and oriented itself to enter the Martian atmosphere.
This is a big first step. Getting the cruise stage separated. It's now, after the vehicle turns itself to the right orientation, the cruise stage is now going to be get further and further away until it's about 3 or 4 football fields away, and will burn up in parallel as the vehicle enters Mars.
And Christine mentioned turn to entry. What does that mean?
Well, it's because the cruise stage has to be pushed off to one side, like this. The rest of the vehicle has to turn to face the atmosphere and to be dead nuts on as it hits the top of the atmosphere.
So this is taking all the heat coming into the atmosphere.
Exactly. It'll be both provide a source of drag, but also thermal protection because it gets over 1,500 degrees Celsius on the top of on this heat shield. Very, very hot. But on the inside of the heat shield, it may be only a fraction of a few degrees above room temperature. So it's a wonderful protective device to keep our lander safe.
All right. So the next thing we're standing by for is
entry. Getting to the top of the atmosphere, gradually slowing down. Right now, the vehicle's just now beginning to. Very soon, we'll be beginning to feel the atmosphere touching it. Actually, entry is above the atmosphere slightly, so it's really not until a few. Half a minute or so after entry before we start really detecting the fact that that atmosphere is slowing us down.
All right, we'll be standing by.
Yes, exciting.
No, it'll probably be down in about 9 minutes. Before that, we'll definitely get some information on how it's doing with the retro rockets, the boosters, the separations, the parachute. A lot of stuff to come up. It's going to be pretty nerve-wracking all the way down.
Rob, now entry is scheduled for 11:47. The cruise stage SEP and the entry times are locked in, correct?
They are. They're locked in when we selected the target and aimed the vehicle very precisely. That allows us to know exactly when we hit the entry point, which is 35, 55 kilometers from the center of Mars.
So we know those times are locked in, but what about all the other events that take place in EDL?
Regi Science reports dropping carrier power as
Tom,
expected.
Marco A and Marco B have telemetry.
They're clapping about the two CubeSat satellites are working just fine alongside InSight.
They are doing their job. These small CubeSats are relaying ones and zeros with a few seconds lag from the vehicle up to these two vehicles, and they forward them back to Earth to the Deep Space Network using X-band antennas.
And keep in mind, this was all an experiment. We weren't sure that this was going to work, but we had this need that we didn't have live communication in this particular mission.
Well, we don't really need communications. We don't need their information, except if something went wrong. We would very much like to get the data right now. We have other spacecraft.
We are now receiving InSight telemetry via the Marco relay.
It's flowing into their station. That means the team now can watch the data flowing onto their screens as if they're commuting directly.
This data will provide detailed information about the state of the spacecraft throughout EDL.
Now, if those CubeSats didn't work, it wouldn't affect the mission. It was just to see if we could send CubeSats to Mars at all.
This is wonderful news. This will allow us to give some, if this continues working all the way to the ground and beyond, we might even see a first picture from the surface of Mars.
Wouldn't that be great?
Very soon.
Atmospheric entry on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
Here we go.
So in a few seconds, the vehicle will start sensing the atmosphere. I said 22 kilometers from the center of Mars. And it's going to start to slow down very, very slowly at first, but then faster and faster and faster till it reaches about 7 Gs. I made that mistake on the video. It's actually 7 Gs, not 12. And so, but we'll still very, very quickly slow down. And from 15...
In approximately 1 minute, InSight is expected to reach its maximum heating rate.
Oh, yes.
Plasma blackout is possible during peak heating and could cause a temporary dropout of telemetry. This could last for as long as 2 minutes.
Yeah, the gas that comes off the heat shield as it's slowing down, it looks like a meteor if you're on Mars watching the streak go by. That brightness of gas does interfere with the radio reception. And so it's possible that Marco will lose that signal while it's going through this very hot entry.
But not to be alarmed.
Not to be alarmed. It's part of the design. We completely expect it.
Radio Science reports plasma blackouts as expected.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So currently they're not getting any signals from the lander until it's...
Reported plasma blackout. Still receiving InSight telemetry via Marco.
Marco Alpha has carrier interruption.
InSight should now be experiencing the peak heating rate. Portions of the heat shield may reach nearly 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit as it protects the lander from the heating environment.
That's hot.
Yeah, Flips, I hope they did a quick save.
Marco Bravo shows carrier interruption, but still in lock.
I think they're playing Iron Man. Great test. I don't know. Hopefully they use all the struts and boosters they could get.
InSight has passed through peak deceleration. Telemetry shows the spacecraft saw about 8 Gs.
Marco Alpha and Marco Bravo maintain lock.
Radio science reports carrier detected.
So, several different communications coming in.
InSight is now traveling at a velocity of 2,000 meters per second.
Seems to have passed this very critical point of peak heating and peak deceleration. The next big step is parachute inflation.
And you can see that on our timeline on the bottom of the screen. The next event is parachute deploy.
InSight is now traveling at 1,000 meters per second. Once InSight slows to about 400 meters per second, it will deploy its 12-meter diameter supersonic parachute. The parachute will deploy nominally at about Mach 1.7.
So great test. That's what they meant by supersonic parachute.
Standing by for parachute deploy.
Radio science reports sudden change in Doppler.
Ground stations are observing signals consistent with parachute deploy.
Marco Alpha, Marco Bravo maintain lock status.
Telemetry shows parachute deployment. Radar powered on. Heat shield separation commanded.
This is really good news so far.
So now they just have to drop the thing and hope the rockets turn on.
Pins and needles.
We have radar activation where the radar is beginning to search for the ground. Once the radar locks on the ground and InSight is about 1 kilometer above the surface, the lander will separate from the backshell and begin terminal descent using its 12 descent engines. Altitude convergence, the radar has locked on the ground.
Yes.
Standing by for lander separation.
Carrier interruption on Marco Alpha and Marco Bravo.
Lander separation commanded. Altitude 600 meters.
So now it's dropping.
Gravity turn. Altitude 400 meters.
We're getting there.
300 meters. 200 meters. 80 meters. 60 meters. 50 meters. Constant velocity. 37 meters.
Slowing down.
30 meters. 20 meters. 17 meters. Standing by for touchdown.
That face.
Touchdown confirmed. InSight is on the surface of Mars.
Yay! Oh, I'm so happy. The guy's face, you see his lips quiver and the other guy going, oh, I think we got it. Oh, good. Now we just got to make sure the thing works.
This never gets old.
No, it doesn't, Rob. Control
what a
room
relief.
just erupted.
Fabulous.
Shaking
Fabulous.
hands with the Marco team
Marcos.
there.
Christine, you did great. Tim Preiser, one of the key designers at Lockheed. Sandy Krasner. What a great team. What a great
going on in there. What a relief. We've cut over to the camera over in Times Square. Boy, people are weathering the rain to see this.
The scariest part of it is over. Now, we gotta make sure we haven't landed on like a giant granite slab of rock, which I'm pretty sure we haven't. But yeah, there's still a lot more science to go.
This is the hardest part. Getting to the surface of Mars is very hard. This thing has a lot more to do, though. There's a lot more to go on both today and the days that follow before the science can begin. But just getting a vehicle from Earth to the surface of Mars is no mean feat.
And Rob, could you talk about that? I mean, just the mere accomplishment here that we're seeing.
You have to understand that this vehicle is very complicated. It uses 12 engines. Each of those engines are pulsed 10 times a second, producing these little tiny impulses, almost like little bullets that keep the vehicle going at a constant velocity as it approaches the ground, and still going over 5 miles an hour. So those legs feel a fair amount of crush. We still don't know the state of the vehicle right now. We need to look to make sure there are no rocks nearby. The solar panels will be in just a few, in about 5 to 10 minutes, will begin to open up. They're waiting for the dust to settle, because the dust there's certainly a lot of dust being lifted in the air around the vehicle right now, which is now just settling.
So we're standing by. After touchdown, it waits a couple of minutes to give us an X-band beep.
You see, they're all over the image processing lab. They're waiting for the images to come in.
Directly to Earth from InSight.
Yes, and it goes to the Deep Space Network. There's also something that might be happening now, if we're very lucky. InSight might be able to relay an image or a partial image taken just a couple minutes after landing. So I'm standing by hoping to see that. But if that doesn't happen, we'll certainly get more images later in our Odyssey pass in about 5 hours.
We see Bruce Banner waiting for it.
They're
I don't know if they see it yet.
They're waiting. That's Justin Mackey and Bruce Banner looking carefully at the cameras to see what they might see. Waiting for the image to come back.
So this is the first image from InSight itself. InSight is taking a picture with one of its 2 cameras.
Yes.
It's probably a view of what's directly in front of the spacecraft, right in front of the lander. This is a camera that it would be using to figure out, is this a good space?
Exactly.
Is it a good place to put down our instruments? So it is going to take an image and then send that image to the Marcos. The Marcos, in turn, will relay it back down to Earth.
That's correct. They got it. Oh, now
Let's
just wait. Let's see what they saw. There it is. Whoa, right.
Not too rocky, not too sandy. It looks pretty good.
That's a good thing. That's not far from where we'll be able to deploy the instruments. So it's great. I don't see a lot of.
Let's explain that image. Now, this image has a dust.
Yeah, what are we looking at?
EDLCom, we have lost the signal for Marco.
You can see potentially a lot of
radio science
a lot of debris
reports
that might be on the camera.
LOS for UHF.
So we don't know what I'm looking
Thank
at.
you, everybody on EDLCom.
All right.
Yeah. Yay, Marco.
So that image was sent to us via the 2 CubeSats, the Marco. Otherwise, we would have had to wait a lot
You can see a
longer.
better view. You can see that really is debris. And there's the horizon back there, the bluish sky. That's part of the lander deck on the front left.
Oh,
I
yeah,
can't
look at all that
make out.
dust.
It looks like there's not a lot of rocks in the field of view, but those dots you see there are very likely to be dust particles on the lens, the dust cover.
I see a
which
big
will
rock
be
right there in the
removed
front.
And we'll get
moved.
another shot
Yes.
later on.
Yes. and a better, clearer view after the dust cutter is removed. So Insight's, CubeSat's relay communications job is done. They're now flying on. They're now taking pictures back toward Mars. Hopefully, MRO, which flew overhead, might have been lucky enough to capture the descent of this InSight lander under its parachute. While this was going on, MRO was flying overhead, recording the data, also monitoring the transactions and recording every bit of signal it could. But it also had the ability to take a picture, and maybe like we did with both Phoenix and later for Curiosity rover, we might be able to see the parachute inflated.
That would be fantastic. We are standing by now for that X-band beep.
Yes.
InSight phoning home saying, I'm here and I'm okay.
The next lander is going to actually have a drone. It's going to be flying around, a little drone flyer, the next Mars rover. So that's going to be pretty exciting. I wonder how much battery life it has to it. I wonder if it goes back to the rover to recharge and then goes back out again to take pictures and whatnot. That one's going to be pretty interesting.
The DSN and X-band.
Radio science reports X-band carrier detected.
The DSN and X-band radio science required the X-band touchdown for InSight. X-band continue for 4.5 minutes with InSight in normal mode.
Copy that. Thank you.
Flawless. Flawless.
We've got the beep. This was perfect case scenario.
This is what we really hoped and imagined in our mind's eye. Though we spend most of our visualizing all these bad things can happen. Sometimes things work out in your favor, and we'll look very carefully at the data to see what might have, how well it went. But it certainly looked like it was a very successful and perfect landing. We'll have to see as we get more data how well things go. And as the vehicle proceeds, the solar panels will be deployed. Hopefully, we're not on a tilt. It doesn't look like we are, but from the image. But the solar panels will be deployed safely, we hope. And we'll get confirmation of that around 5 o'clock local time here in about 4.5 hours, 5 hours from now.
And this is such a difficult feat in that because of the one-way light time, there is no way that any of these engineers could possibly control the vehicle. It all has to be done in commands and software.
We have to train it to do this work on its own.
Radio science reports nominal carrier 30 seconds past the first acquisition. So we're all nominal on the surface.
So the vehicle is completely nominal, reported nominal. It's happy. The lander is not complaining. We had a way to tell us if it was unhappy, and it wasn't. It's not unhappy. It's in a normal mode, and so it's going to chug along for the rest of the afternoon on Mars and finish the activities.
All right. Well, Rob, I know you're anxious to get in and congratulate the crew. Thank you so much for sitting here and helping us out explain EDL.
Sparrow asks if this is for the supposed lake underneath. No, it's not for the supposed lake. It's to measure seismic waves underneath the Mars's surface to see what the interior of the planet's made out of, its core. Great test. Yeah, it does have feelings. It has a Twitter, and I think also Curiosity has a Twitter feed also, and it writes as though it's a person.
On InSight Ops, Opto Loop recording completed at 20:04:34.
How deep will it drill, Darren? About 5 meters. Thanks, chat. Thanks for helping. That's what I love about you guys. Yeah. Unless it's rock, then it'll be less than 5 meters. Approximately. Some space-related banter going on here in the chat. Thank you guys for coming. I'm still streaming. Gonna see what else is going on before we log off. But they made it, and I'm so glad you guys are here. We usually play video games, but this is about space, and it's something important to us. Exploration. It's it's where we want to be. You know, it'd be really nice to live in. Well, talking for myself, I would love to live in the future, where I'm in a spaceship flying on planets and being able to land whenever I want. But in this case.
To get your take on what was it like to be.
Oh, here's a NASA administrator.
What was it like?
Well, I'll tell you, it was intense, and you could feel the emotion. It was very, very quiet when it was time to be quiet, and of course very celebratory with every little new piece of information that was received. It's very different being here than watching it on TV, by far. I can tell you that for sure. Now that I've experienced both, and then of course. You know, what's amazing is as soon as it was over, I got a call on my cell phone, and it was the phone number was all zeros. And whenever I get a phone call that's all zeros, it's got to be somebody important. I answered it, and it was the vice president.
Oh my gosh!
He watched the whole thing. He is absolutely ecstatic about our program. As you're aware, he's the chairman of the National Space Council, and he's been, of course, a keen advocate for what we do. To have him call within seconds of mission success is tremendous. And just so everybody knows, he wants me to say congratulations to everybody here at NASA and all of our international partners and everybody who has contributed to this mission. What an amazing day for NASA.
It is an amazing accomplishment in that this is something that is happening millions and millions and millions of miles away, and these people are able to do it.
Incredible. And what's fascinating is the whole time I'm watching it, I'm thinking every milestone is something that happened 8 minutes ago, because that's the time lag to get a signal from Mars to Earth.
Yes.
And so it's kind of you know, it's exciting, but then you have to step back and realize that this has already occurred in history. So it's a unique experience, incredible, and just the enthusiasm here is incredible.
So what's for the future? Looking ahead, 2020?
Well, let's get through December. So for the rest of we think about what's happening next. December 3rd, we're launching another American astronaut to the International Space Station. So that's going to be a big achievement, and it's going to be on a Russian Soyuz rocket that the last time we launched a human was not successful.
That was scary.
It was scary, but we figured out what the problem is. We're moving forward, and now we've got that underway December 3rd. Going forward from there, we're going to get the first science data back from the Parker Solar Probe on December 7th. So that's not too far away either. And then we've got OSIRIS-REx that will be in orbit around Bennu shortly after Christmas. So no shortage of exciting things. And then on January 1st, we're going to fly the New Horizons mission, which for people who are not aware, that's the mission that went to Pluto back in 2014, gave us stunning images and data and information science on Pluto. And now that mission is still going strong. It's in what we call the Kuiper Belt now, which is an asteroid belt well beyond Pluto, and it's going to be taking images of Ultima Thule, which is an object in the Kuiper Belt, which we have never been able to go out there and take images of anything at close range before, and now we're doing it. So you ask what's happening next.
I asked.
we have right now at NASA, there is more underway, probably than I don't know how many years passed, but it's like, you know, there's a drought, and then all of a sudden there's all these activities all at once. So we're busy. We're going to be working through the holiday, but a lot of amazing discoveries to be made, and we're looking forward to it.
It's so funny because our Ask NASA question you basically answered is, does the success of NASA InSight influence the timeline for future manned lunar or Mars missions?
Well, certainly everything we learn about Mars at this point is going to help us understand how to do in situ resource utilization. So InSight could actually provide some really good information about whether or not there's liquid water on Mars, and maybe even where it is and how to get to it. We strongly believe that there's liquid water, 10 kilometers under the surface of Mars. So the key is, the answer is yes. The more we learn, the more we're able to achieve. And so to get to Mars, yes. But the lunar missions, the president's first space policy directive is to go to the moon, to go sustainably with international and commercial partners. So when we say sustainably, that means we're going to have reusability built into the system. And we're going to test and prove technologies at the moon that ultimately we can replicate at Mars. So we're going to retire risk, prove human physiology at the moon, which is only a 3-day journey, which means if something goes wrong, you can get home safely. We saw that with Apollo 13. But we need to use the moon as a proving ground to accelerate our path to Mars. In the meantime, we're doing missions like InSight to learn as much about Mars as possible. InSight is going to help us understand really asteroid impacts as well, because it's got a seismometer, which is going to help us know how often is Mars getting impacted with asteroids. And if we're going to send humans there, it'd be important to know if those humans are going to experience asteroid impacts. So,
and that's pretty much our goal, is always learn from our missions and build upon those missions.
One after another. And NASA has a long history of doing just amazing work in building on its past successes and, in fact, its past failures.
That's true.
I'll tell you, what an amazing time to be at the helm of this extraordinary agency.
Well, we are so glad that you are here to share it with us.
Well, Gay,
thanks for joining us.
A true pleasure. Thank you.
All right, and I'm sure you need to go in there and celebrate with those folks, but thank you for stepping out for us.
Absolutely. Thank you
so
much.
All right, take care. Now, Mars exploration is cool stuff, but if you're not convinced just yet, just talk to the InSight scientists and engineers. No one conveys the excitement more than the people who actually work on the mission. So earlier this year, the outreach team filled up a van and went to 15 California cities. They called it the InSight Roadshow.
So we're here in San Francisco at the Exploratorium, and this is part of InSight's Roadshow. Since it's the first interplanetary mission we've ever launched from California, we're actually doing a lot of public engagement activities along California.
And we're just talking to the public and talking to them about InSight and getting them excited and sort of sharing information that they probably wouldn't get just from a website.
We have Mars globes and touchables kits. We have replica of the actual launch vehicle that's going to be taking InSight to Mars.
I've been reading the comments. Thanks, guys. I'm happy to share these moments with you guys too. All of us playing space games together and having similar experiences. It's nice to experience something in real life, something that's pretty important and pretty darn cool with you guys too. Follow the links that are in the description for about InSight and a lot of other NASA videos and topics. Somebody asked if there was one, if it's possible if they imaged the whole planet of Mars, and yes, they have the high-res photos. Not only have they imaged all of the planet, it's also 3D. So you can, depending on which image set you're looking at, you can look at certain parts of Mars in 3 dimensions as though you're flying over it in a video game. I'll do a video about that so we can learn more about those sort of things, and I'll send you guys some videos about how they selected landing sites for Mars, and then also make a video maybe about also the images that they have done for Mars. It's kind of funny to hear me talk about Mars when my name is Mars, but there you go. Like Google Earth? Yes, a lot like Google Earth. But just not for the whole planet just yet. All these images are done in stereo and overlapped in different directions, and it depends on the time of year, also on the time of day. So they can't do all of them in 3D just because the time of day and time of year does change every time they go over a certain spot. But they can go over, get the whole topography of everything, and then put that into a computer and make computer created images with a bit of a terrain texture to put on top of that. So who knows? Maybe in the future we'll have like a whole planet, the whole planet of Mars to do Google Earth flyovers with. That'd be pretty cool. They're not there yet, but they have done quite a bit. Kicklers. Yeah, it's about 20 minutes ago, but this will be in the archives. You'll be able to see it again. And also, if you go to any of the NASA sites, just type in NASA InSight Mars landing, and you'll have it. My favorite part of the whole thing is when you saw a couple guys starting to tear up, getting ready to start crying, and one guy, his face just lit up, like he saw the signals coming in before anybody else said anything, and that was pretty powerful. That was pretty neat to see. I had a feeling it wasn't about, they weren't crying, that it was crashing, because I think you would have just had your hand in your face at that point, or like be like a little bit of a sigh of like, oh jeez, rather than like tear up about it. Theo. Let's see. Pluto, always saying funny things. You're in the shower? Well, they do make these things for phones. They make them waterproof, so I don't know. You could have, I know a lot of people listen to our streams, just the audio part of it, and then they just hear us chat, and then you can listen to that. Basically, you wouldn't have missed much, because I think they were just showing the control room, and I say think, I mean I was there, I was watching it. They're just showing the control room and the overhead of like what was going on, what was being nominal, and then waiting to hear, when they've touched down and whatnot. So you didn't get this. They didn't have any visual representations of what happened, but you definitely felt the atmosphere. You cut, as they say, they cut the atmosphere with a knife. How tense it was in there. So that was pretty special. So that would be nice to watch again. I definitely will watch that part again. I'm glad to hear it, Red Craig. I'm glad to stream this. I'll try to stream these guys whenever it's possible. I think the last time last time a rover landed on Mars, it was really late at night, and it was about like 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, I can't remember. So it probably wouldn't have been feasible, but this was nice. It was during the middle of the day, and it was nice to share with you guys as much as I could, and hopefully, if you guys have any questions, to send us any messages on Twitter or in the comment section once this thing is archived, and I'll do my best to answer all your questions.
So a lot of the basic design we kind of inherited for this mission. On the other hand, we had a little bit of
Oh yeah, who got their names on the chip on board? Yeah, I was thinking about sending my name on the chip on board, but then I thought I don't like forums, so I didn't do it. And there's also a bunch of names and on a CD that's with a Parker solar probe going to the sun. Get your names on there. That'd be pretty cool, but I don't know. Thank you, Admiral Spee. We'll have a regular stream soon. Not today, but a different day this week. And I'll let you guys know on Twitter. But for now, I think that's about all there is to show. We'll know more about how the lander is doing, how its instruments are doing in the next 5 hours, as they shake down the probe and make sure all the instruments are fine, and also the solar arrays deploy. We'll see it power up on its own power, and then that'll be it. We're ready to do science. Many thanks for the stream. Thank you for tolerating my commentary. I was very nervous today. As you guys know, I talk 24/7, so I usually, it's hard for me not to talk, and it's also, in this case, I was very distracted by what was going on, so I kept saying things over my words. Great test. My fellow streaming friend was nice to point out whenever my English was poor. I appreciated that. And I'll see you guys. Next time. And we're going to be pressing the buttons. Oh, yeah. One last thing. Have a good day.